This is Tavia Gilbert, speaking with Steve Durbin, Managing Director of the Information Security Forum. And today we're going to discuss managing through a breach. We discussed earlier the importance of having an intelligent response about cybersecurity in order to gain stakeholder trust. However, this goes deeper, given the challenging environment that occurs after a breach. For organizations that suffer an incident, not only has their data been stolen, but they can be subject to stronger financial penalties, greater legislative and regulatory scrutiny, and tangible reputational damage. As data breaches continue to escalate, as you say they will, responding in an intelligent and confident manner is critical. Given this challenging environment, let's look at how to manage through an incident so an organization can not only protect their customers, but also safeguard the value of their business. Who are some of the external people and stakeholder groups that should be communicated with in the event of a cyber attack?
Well, it depends again on the sort of industry that you're in, but it will, I think for most organizations today now, include a forensic team. It will certainly include law enforcement. It may include the regulator. So if you happen to be in a highly regulated industry, then certainly it will involve the regulator. But there are some other constituent parts as well that people perhaps forget. So employees, everybody who works in the organization, not just because it might affect them, but because, of course, they talk to other people about what's going on. So you need to have your message for the employees. It needs to be your shareholders. Certainly it needs to be your investors if you have any. And really what you're trying to do is to communicate as much as possible. And that actually is quite difficult. Now, in the Yahoo instance, that breach took place a couple of years ago before they discovered it. The average in the industry is probably about 150 days before they discover a breach. So you can do a lot of damage during that period of time. Very few organizations have the forensic teams that they can just immediately point to a breach to really dig into it and find out what's gone on. So there is always going to be a period of time when you simply don't know what the damage is. And so how do you communicate during that period? And that really is why I think when certainly I talk to organizations about how they should be preparing for this sort of thing, it is about planning that out. What can we sensibly say? Do we have an audit trail of what we've achieved, what we tried to do, so that we can point to that and say, well, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, and this is how we're working on it. Because that takes the tension out of it, takes the heat out of the situation. And very few organizations have that in place.
How can a chief information security officer best prepare for the likelihood that a data breach might occur in their organization? What is there to do to be proactive?
Yeah, it's about planning for the day that you hope never arrives, and actually it is not that different from what IT people have always done. I mean, if you think about it, in the world of IT, disaster recovery, business continuity planning, that's always existed. Boards of directors understand that as well. So this is a good jumping off point. I think that what we haven't done is look at it within the security world in perhaps the same way. So the CISO's job here is really to try to emulate that. I think it's to learn from perhaps some of the mistakes that have been made in that whole area and to put together what I would call a cyber response team. This will run from the board of directors right the way down through the organization. So it will take into account, for instance, your lawyer. It will take into account your PR firm, your HR people. So perhaps parts of the business that you wouldn't necessarily associate with a cyber response. But the reason for that is that impacts of breaches are just so far reaching. You want to be able to cover off all of these different elements. And really the time to be engaging with your lawyer is not when the breach has already happened. You really want to get ahead of the game. So you put together the overall team. It's about defining the different roles. It's about ensuring then that you actually practice. So it is about calling a fire drill on a regular basis. It isn't about putting it into a very nice process that you lock in a cupboard, because life isn't like that in cyber. So get the team together, rehearse, practice, really become aware of what's going on in the market as well. So use things like Yahoo, like Sony, like Target as your worst case scenarios. How would we respond as a business in that particular instance? What did they do well? What did they do not quite so well? How could we translate that for our investors, for our shareholders? and really sort of dig into those sorts of things and just play it out. I think those are the things that we should be doing. But again, very few organizations are really doing that at the moment.
How are the risks in cyberspace outpacing the typical risk management approach most companies take?
I think if we look at the way in which companies have traditionally come to risk, it has tended, I think, in a lot of instances, to have been based either on a compliance-driven approach, so it's been imposed, if you like, by a legislator or a regulator, or it has been based on experience that may have been gained either by that company itself or indeed by other organizations within the same vertical sector or the same region. Cyber is very different. And protecting yourself in a cyber environment requires you to, I think, change some of your traditional thinking. And the reason I say that it's different is that what we see is a large number of attacks or breaches that really bear no resemblance to what we've seen before. Now, there'll be people listening that say, well, actually, denial of service attacks have been around for a very long time. Yes, they have. However, the scale of the attack hasn't been around for that period of time.
500 million users.
Absolutely. If you look at Yahoo, if you look at some of the other attacks that have taken place as well, the ability to pull together the degree of computing power to hit and take down banks, for instance, is absolutely unprecedented, and we're seeing that kind of thing. So, given that we're in an environment where we can't predict, yet we have to prepare, the only thing that we can do is to really adopt a much more resilient approach that says, okay, we're now assuming that there will be a day when we have an attack, when we're breached, when there is a problem. How are we going to respond to that? So let's plan for that. Let's put in place our cyber response team. Let's put in place our cyber response plans. Let's determine how we're going to respond irrespective of where these attacks come from, and how do we get our business back up and running as quickly as possible. Those are the key things that we need to be looking at. And yes, of course, there is a role for risk in all of that, because we're trying to balance all the time the amount of effort, cost, resource that we're devoting into that area versus the risk appetite in the business. So I'm not saying chuck out risk completely, quite the opposite actually. What I'm saying is let's build on top of the very well-established processes that we have within risk of managing risk as an organization, but also look to the future where the future is absolutely unclear and try to anticipate and plan for the way in which we will respond to that. That for me is cyber resilience.
You've mentioned the development of an incident response team, and I'm wondering what that team looks like. Who within the organization should be a part of that team and be having those conversations?
Yeah, it ranges from the boardroom, as I've said before, right the way down into IT security, but it takes in all of the different departments across the business. So for instance, if we're planning for the unexpected, we don't know where an attack is going to come from. We need to have, I think, in place in our framework, therefore, a solid set of governance, plans, processes that really provide us with a starting point. We need to have a degree of situational awareness. So we need to be watching what's happening in the market. How are we really reviewing what the different state of the threat landscape might be? Lots of people out there who can provide input into that. Verizon does it on an ongoing basis. We do it at the ISF. We produce a threat horizon that looks forward 2 years. We're the only organization I'm aware of that does do that looks forward as opposed to telling you what happened yesterday. But pull in all of those different components so that you're getting really solid situational awareness, because that's what your response team is really going to be playing off. They're going to be anticipating or trying to play out different scenarios. And then it's about getting the team to assess how effective any response might be to a certain breach or an attack, and then planning for that. So the cyber response team, of course, will rely very heavily on information security, but at the same time, it will pull in different elements of the business, because what you're trying to do is to best equip your business to respond at a business level to what is, after all, an attack on the way in which your business operates.
It's eye-opening to realize how a data breach crisis can have such a far-reaching and drastic impact. But you've offered some hope by pointing out that it's indeed possible to manage through a breach with a tactical response plan to anticipate and contain the damage, and why it is so very important for businesses to prepare for, as you say, the day you hope never happens. For more information on how your organization can manage through a breach and develop an incident response plan, please visit www.securityforum.org. Steve, next time we sit down, we're going to look at the threat landscape for 2017, when we'll discuss the rapidly changing threat landscape, identify the key cyber challenges, and suggest ways of managing the associated risks. I look forward to it. Till next time.